Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. Today we are planning to um, disseminate some information about shadow teaching from our experience over the past 3 to 4 years. So Insighte has been providing the services for a lot of families in Bangalore. And we've been supporting families by providing support teachers, including shadows for schools and special educators who would go and support the children at home. So today I just wanted to talk a little bit more about shadow teaching so that people understand what it means and what are some of the advantages of it, or what are some of the challenges in it, and how is it that we at Insighte have been able to overcome some of these challenges and move forward with the shadow teaching program. So today what I'll do is I'll just do a 15-minute it's about a 10-minute, giving you an idea of what shadow teaching is. And then I have my co-presenter Tasnim Banu today. She is one of the shadow teachers with Insighte who has been with us for about 3 years now. And she would be giving you first-hand information on what it is like to be a shadow teacher and be at the front line working with the children. So I will do a little bit of introduction on shadow teaching, and then Tasnim will take over and she will be able to help you understand a little bit more about the responsibilities, roles and responsibilities of a shadow. We also have a few compilation of frequently asked questions, and I'll try and answer some of those. And then after that, we will be opening this up for an open forum. You are welcome to ask questions and share your comments about shadow teaching during that time. So to get started, let's understand what shadow teaching is. So when we talk about shadow teaching, even though the concept is called shadow teaching, I prefer to use the term support teachers, the teachers who are there and helping the children. A support teacher, so when we talk about shadow teaching, in our heads, we think about a support teacher who shadows the child throughout the day while the child is at school. This teacher helps supports the child in academic tasks, helps the child with behavioral regulation, so which means the classroom and the school will have rules that the child needs to follow, but the child is unable to do it on his or her own, so the teacher is there to support him to follow those rules and regulate his behavior according to the expectations of the setting. The shadow teacher or the support teacher also supports the child with emotional regulation. There are a lot of children who don't know how to react appropriately in a certain situation. So they may get angry too easily, or they may get excited too easily, but these might not be appropriate for the setting in which the child is at that point. So the shadow teacher helps the child regulate the emotions also. The shadow or the support teacher also helps with socialization. A lot of children have difficulty sometimes initiating a social interaction with a peer, or sometimes they know how to initiate it, but they don't know how to keep it going, how to maintain the social interaction with the peer. So the support teacher helps the child navigate through those social difficulties or social intricacies and makes it a little bit more easier for the child while the child is at school. Now, this is a gist of what the shadow teacher does in while they are working with the child in a school setting. Now, when we talk about, now there are a lot of places where I saw, which was very interesting, that they've defined a shadow teacher as somebody who shadows the class teacher. So we've been talking about a person who was shadowing the child, right? But I thought it was very interesting because that makes a lot more sense when you say that a shadow shadows the teacher who is teaching in the classroom, the primary teacher. So we'll come back to that when we talk about the advantages of this model. So we're going to keep that aside. Now, why is shadow teaching so relevant today? we know that we are moving towards a more and more inclusive world. We don't want to have our children who are different or our children who have different learning needs to be separated.
Excuse me, ma'am. There's an
Yes.
echo. Could you please help that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Hey, can others mute their microphones? I think the echo happens because if somebody's microphone is on. So can everybody ensure that their microphones are switched off? I mean, sorry, it's a, muted the microphone.
Let me see if I can mute them.
Yeah, I think you can do if somebody's mic.
Yes. Is it better now?
Yes, ma'am. Hello? Yes,
yes.
ma'am.
All right, thank you. So we were talking about how is this relevant today? So we know that we are moving towards a more inclusive society, a more inclusive world where we want everybody to be in the same setting together, no matter what their differences are, what their shortcomings are. So even if a child has a learning difference or needs a different type of approach to learning, we still don't want them to be in a separate setting. We want them to come together and be with neurotypical children, or as we call them, neurotypical children, and access education in the same environment as everybody does. So when our kids have difficulties in, say, for example, we have a lot of children who are very bright. They are very good when it comes to academic tasks, but they're not able to, for example, regulate their behaviors or regulate their emotions. So that is when it becomes harder for them to adjust in a classroom environment, for example. So in these situations, it would be helpful to have a person who can facilitate this regulation. So it is not that the child cannot do it at all, but the child cannot probably do it on his or her own. So if there is a support person who can regulate this or support this child in regulating those behaviors, regulating those emotions, it becomes easier to include this child in a regular setup. And we also know that we have a lot of children who are having different types of learning needs, and we used to have there used to be an age or an era when we used to send all our children with learning differences to a segregated setup, which would be a special needs school, a completely segregated special needs school. But today we see a lot more children, as I said earlier, who don't fit into a segregated special needs setup either. So which means they have to be in an environment that is regular, or they need to get that kind of stimulation. So for those reasons, we have to ensure that these children are included in our regular setups. So a shadow teaching model or a support teacher model facilitates that, having that child be in that regular setup. The other difficulty that we are seeing today is that there are a lot of schools that are interested in giving admission to a child who has a learning difference, but they do not have the bandwidth to support this child, or in some cases, the schools choose not to provide the services that is needed to support this child. So in those cases, a model like this, a model that involves a person who goes in and supports the child in the classroom, becomes all the more relevant. Now, what are some of the services that we offer at Insighte? I can give you the example of Insighte when we talk about shadow teaching. So a person who is appointed as a support teacher or a shadow teacher for a child is at the school throughout the school day with the child. In some cases, this person also rides the school bus with the child. So in the morning when the child leaves the home, and on his or her bus ride to the school and back from the school, the support teacher is there with the child. Now, this is not for all cases, but in most cases when the parents request or the school request, we arrange for that also. And then, as I said earlier, the teacher supports the child in academics, behavioral regulation, emotional regulation. In a lot of cases, when we find that the child is in a age appropriate class. Say, for example, the child is in a third grade class and the child is old enough to be in a third grade class. But when it comes to his academic competence or academic level of performance, the child is not up to par with his peers. So in those cases, our support teachers also find separate time during the school day or maybe after the school day, where the child is given training or remedial education or remedial classes to fill up that gap that the child is having. So if the child is in third grade, but the child's math performance level is at a first grade or a second grade level, the support teacher kind of helps the child to bridge that gap also. Another thing that happens when there is a support teacher in the school is that a lot of our children who have learning differences are not very good at reporting what happens at the school when they come back home. So in those instances, we see a lot of children who miss out on homework that they were supposed to do, or the teacher must have communicated something verbally which the child forgot and the child does not come and inform the parents about. Or there are a lot of difficulties that happen when it comes to communication between home and school, especially with children who have learning differences. So a support teacher or a shadow teacher kind of facilitates this communication also. So they kind of act as a bridge between the school and the home and make sure that the communication from the home effectively reaches the school and the communication from the school effectively reaches the family. Our support teachers also are engaged in supporting the child if the child has an IEP, an individualized education plan at the school. But in addition to that, we also set our own goals. So our teachers assess the child, understand what the child's level is, and then set small goals for the child. And it's usually we do a monthly goal. So we set our monthly goals and then we work towards helping the child getting to those goals by the end of each month. We also do monthly reports for the families, and when requested by some families, we also provide daily or weekly updates on what happens in the classroom with the child and with the child's learning within the classroom. So those are some of the services that we provide. I'm sure Tasnim will be able to add on to this later on in her talk. Now, when we talk about support teaching, we at Insighte, we are very particular about the training that these teachers get. Now, when we hire teachers, we usually hire people who have at least a master's degree in psychology. Now, when we have an intake of teachers at the beginning of a year, we do an initial training. Now, because these teachers are coming from a psychology background, we do the training for the special education piece. So we help them understand, connect psychology to the special needs, topic, and also kind of help them with a lot of strategies that are used when we are working with children with learning differences. So our initial training involves a little bit of training in special education, a little bit of training in assessment and data collection within the classroom, training in report writing and how to communicate the child's progress and goals with the families as well. So these are some of the things that we do in our initial training. Now our training doesn't stop there. We continue to have a lot of trainings. We do a bi-monthly sessions with our teachers, which where we at least devote to at least one session a month towards training. So we pick a topic that the teachers are struggling with or the teachers are interested in learning about, and we bring in resource persons who are good in that field to come and train the teachers also. Now, the other thing that we do at Insighte, which is one of the most important elements, I think, of the services that we provide, is an ongoing supervision. Supervision is where we have, so usually I conduct the supervision sessions, and I support the teachers through the supervision process, where they come back. So when we train a teacher, we give them the initial skills needed to be in the classroom and to work with the child. But once the teacher is there, and once the teacher understands the child, the difficulties that the child faces, or the difficulties that the child faces in that particular classroom, or sometimes the difficulties that the child faces with a particular teacher in that classroom. Sometimes there may be difficulties that the shadow is facing in interacting with the parents. So these are all the difficulties or challenges that we talk about during our supervision session. And for each shadow or for each support teacher who's placed out there, the challenges are going to be different. So our initial training is not going to cover those things. So for us, supervision is when our shadow teachers or our support teachers actually grow, because they learn from their day-to-day activities. They try a lot of different strategies for their child. If that doesn't work, they come back to me. I give them ideas on what can be done in addition to what they're already trying, or what might have gone wrong in what they tried. So these are some of the things that we do in supervision. So initially I lead the supervision, but as the year goes on, it turns out to be peer supervision, where we have all our shadows sit together, all our support teachers be together, and we're all discussing and helping each other. So if one shadow teacher or one support teacher has a difficulty in the classroom, another shadow teacher or support teacher helps them by giving them ideas what that they have tried and has worked for them. So they support each other that way. So peer supervision also comes into picture that way. What are some of the advantages of this model? As we know, as I had mentioned earlier, there are a lot of children who can access education in the regular schools, in the regular setup, but they are not able to do it because of some of the difficulties that they have. It could be a behavior regulation issue, an emotional regulation issue, a social skills issue. It could be any of those, or it could be other way around too. The child is socially brilliant. The child has skills to socialize and be interact with other peers, interact with the teachers, but academically he's struggling. So in all these situations, to have somebody who's there to support the child within that regular education classroom is definitely an advantage. So we've had a lot of families who have benefited from this program. Now, even though we have had a lot of success, we've seen the challenges and the limitations of this model also. We do see that if the shadow or the support teacher is not careful enough, it is very easy for a child to become completely dependent on the support person. Our shadows have, I think so far, the support teachers that I have worked with have been very cognizant of that, very conscious of that, and they evaluate each child's performance, and they decide when it is the right time to take a step back, or to give the child some room, or wean the child away from their support. So some of the teachers do it beautifully. So there are teachers who would say, okay, English he is good in, so I will let him be in his seat and attend class on his own while I go and wait behind the classroom. Or math is when he needs a little bit of my support, so I'll come and sit with him and support him for that. So our teachers do it in a lot of different ways depending on the child's needs and difficulties. So that is one of the limitations that we have seen, where the child becomes dependent on the support teacher. Another difficulty that we have seen is that when there is a shadow teacher or a support teacher who is assigned for the child, the class teacher of the classroom basically just relinquishes her responsibility. She says, oh, there is a support teacher now she'll take care of the child. And she does not even consider this child as part of the class. So she will attend to everybody else and think that, oh, this child has a teacher who's going to support him, so it is not my responsibility, which is also not good, because the child is there to access education just like everybody else does. And he also has a right to this teacher and this teacher's services, right? So we see a lot of teachers do this. I've also had instances where teachers tell the shadow, okay, I'm going to have this I'm going to do this activity right now. And if I don't want him to be part of this activity, so will you please take him away and work with him separately? Now that also happens, which is the opposite of inclusion, right? Now we're trying to facilitate inclusion, and what we're getting here is instances of exclusion of this child. So these are some of the limitations that we see, and we train our shadows to stand up for the child and advocate for the child and talk to these teachers, have conversations with these teachers to facilitate inclusion better. One more disadvantage is not of the actual concept of shadow teaching, but it is how this model is implemented right now. So right now, Insighte is an independent organization who are approached by families when there are difficulties that they face in school, when a child faces difficulties in school. Like say for example, the child has a Mithun, I think this meeting is going to end in a few minutes now.
It will not end, it will continue.
Okay, fine. I got a message, that's fine. Okay. So what is happening right now is we need to have these kinds of infrastructure or this kind of a setup within the school system, so that a child, no matter what his learning needs are, can be supported within the school system. So ideally, a support teacher or a shadow teacher should be allocated to a child by the school itself. But schools are not willing to do this. So that is the reason why an organization like Insighte becomes relevant here. So families approach organizations like Insighte to support them with this need. Now what happens is, when we provide a shadow teacher, she is an external person. She or he is an external person who is not part of the school. So when this person goes in, there are a lot of gray areas. You're not an employee of the school, you are an external person, you're employed by the family, so I'm not sure how much I can let you in, I'm not sure how much information I'm able to share with you. So there's a lot of gray area that becomes very confusing for the shadow, for the family, for the class teacher, and for the child also. So these are some of the difficulties that we have seen so far in this model. I'll also touch a little bit on a few of the regular questions that we get from families. One question is that, why is it that shadow teachers can't have a one-time training and be certified and be done with it? Why do we need to keep training them constantly? As I've already touched upon this, and I've already mentioned, when we hire, we are hiring teachers who have a background in psychology, because that definitely facilitates and it definitely facilitates picking up on these special ed concepts. So it is easier for us to train somebody who has a background in psychology to become special educators or to become support teachers for our children. So when we take them in, a 1 week training is provided, but that 1 week training is not necessarily going to equip them to deal with any child that they interact with. So for example, there might be a teacher A who is going to benefit from this 1 week training and gets a child whose needs are probably easier for her to deal with, and the training that she received in this 1 week can easily be translated to working with this child. But there may be another teacher B whose child has a lot more difficulties than what was covered in this training, and this teacher is having a hard time coping with the needs of the child. So in those cases, an ongoing training makes sense, because we might not be able to cover a lot of topics in that 1 week training. So we need to continue to have different types of trainings, and also continue to keep exposing our teachers to what is new out there, so that they're also abreast with whatever the new technology that is there in this field out. in the rest of the world. A second question we get a lot is about supervision. Why do we need a year-round supervision? Now, supervision is a concept that is underplayed in a country like India. Supervision, I believe, has to be given to anybody, any individual or any professional who works with another human being. Because we're not working with machines, like we're not engineers or we're not IT professionals who are working with machines here. Because for a machine, there might be a protocol and we can just follow that protocol. And if something goes wrong, we can go back and, probably check with that protocol. But that is not how a human being works. And when you talk about children, they develop differently, they behave differently, they learn differently. There are a lot of diversities that we see in children. And it is extremely important for a professional who works with a child to go and talk to another professional to see that what I'm doing is right. Or is there something that I can do differently? Is there something that I can do better to help this child? So supervision serves not only that purpose, supervision also serves the purpose of monitoring the mental health of this professional who's working with the child, which is also very important. We do not give enough attention to the mental health of people who are working with other people. So supervision is important in all those respects. And I think, as I said, it does not get the required emphasis it needs in India, at least. So these are some of the topics that I was planning to cover. Next is about the roles and responsibilities of support teachers, and I would like for Tasnim to take over and talk about this. Tasnim? Tasnim, I've made you the host now.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar on shadow teacher and shadow teaching. And I've been working with Insighte for almost about 2 years now, and I'm here to share my experience on roles and responsibilities of a shadow teacher. So I will share my screen. First and foremost, it's very important, like you have the preliminary information when you join as a shadow teacher. You already have that information from the parent or the school about the child's formal diagnosis, if there's any, or the difficulties that the child is facing, the areas that needs to be worked upon. So you have these preliminary information, but it's extremely important for the first month to observe the child in the classroom setting or in the school, because it's, for example, say like the child is having trouble with communication. Now you need to observe, is it because the others are not interacting with him at all? Is it because others are not initiating any conversation with him? Or is it because he's not being included in group activities? What is it? So that is very important to note. So the observation is very, very crucial in the first month. And you need to note down if there are any behavioral issues, or if there are any behavior that you think needs to be worked upon and you think is important for the child. So you need to note down the time when it occurs, the frequency, where is it occurring, how many times is it occurring. So all of these needs to be noted down, and it is extremely important, and it will help you in your goal setting for the next month.
Tasnim, can you make this
yes.
PPT full screen?
The second responsibility is like once you've done your observation and you know which areas are needs to be covered, so you know like the goals to be set. And the third responsibility is also in the initial month, it's very important you build a rapport with the child. If you're not able to build that rapport, no matter how much you try, it's not going to work out. It's going to be counterproductive. Your effort is going to go to waste. So it's very important, and how you do that is by trying to include the child in every activity that is being done in the class, or you taking the child and saying that, oh, you want to draw, let's sit down together and draw. Oh, what do you want to draw? You want to draw a mountain? Okay, we'll do it together. Oh, and if you see that the child, nobody is including him during the playtime, go and play out with the child. So that is how he will slowly start trusting you, and then he will follow your instructions. The fourth one is identifying his strengths and weaknesses. So weaknesses we very quickly pick up. You know, okay, the child does not do this, the child does not do that, the child is unable to do this. But it is also important to note his strengths so that you can work upon it and build upon it. Like for example, so the child that I'm working with, he's very good with math. But if you say that, oh, he's good with math and just leave it like that, he's not going to progress, right? You won't see the progress of the child. He'll only be stuck with addition and subtraction. Now, he picked up multiplication and division also so beautifully because we encouraged him. So you need to work upon that also. Just because it is his one of his strengths does not mean that you just neglect it. And the other responsibility of the shadow teacher is to be a proper channel for communication between the school and the parents. Like Bindiya ma'am correctly mentioned, like sometimes the children, they miss out on, instructions or some small notes. So you as a shadow teacher become the medium, and you will have to inform the parent or the teacher accordingly, whatever the situation is. Now, also, if the child in the classroom is facing trouble or facing issue with any topic or any concept, then it is your duty. It is your duty to inform the teacher, because the teacher and the class teacher and the shadow teacher together, they have to work together. It is a collaborative process. So the teacher also pitches in, and you also pitch in, and that way the process becomes it becomes easier for the child to learn and pick up things. Like for example, I'll give you the child that I'm working with. His class teacher is very understanding, and she understands that uh, that it's very easy for him to pick up concepts if there are pictures, a lot of pictures. So she tries to get worksheets where there are a lot of pictures, and stories where there are a lot of pictures. So he also enjoys it and he learns very quickly.
Tasnim, can you show it full screen? There's an option to make the PPT full screen, right? Because down, I think, can you see? There's a text mark. Full screen view for the PPT. Not that, on the last. After the minus and plus, yeah, that one.
Is it clear now?
This is better now, yeah.
Yeah. So when you're working with a child, it's important to appreciate the child also. However small the work may be, like it could be as small like the child drops something, even say a pencil or an eraser, but he never takes the trouble of picking it up. So through trials and through working with him, if the child for the first time picks up his pencil when he drops it, you should appreciate. And in the subsequent trials also, you should appreciate the child, because appreciation motivates them, and it increases the likelihood of the behavior to be it increases the likelihood that the behavior will be done again. So it's very important to appreciate the child for the work that he's doing. So I would like to share this picture here. If you see this, this is the work done by the child that I'm currently working with. So he made a poster on the types of media, and then he presented it in class also, and his work is there up on the board. So when I showed him on the board and asked him like, who made this? He said, I made it. And he was so happy. So that little appreciation, that little thing is very important for him. It encourages him a lot. And then this also he made it on design thinking process. So he presented in class also. Now he enjoys it so much. So they have something called show and tell. Every time you say, do you want to do show and tell, he's always ready. He gets up from his chair immediately and he goes up in the front and then he starts explaining. So these are the things that, appreciation does to a child. So this is him showing the different organs of the body. So everybody is seated around him and he's showing everybody the different parts of the body. So this is, he made this on digestive system. This was also this is him explaining to the class how the food moves from the mouth and everything, the whole process. So that is what appreciation does, and it's extremely important that you appreciate. Say it could be as simple as saying just thank you for sitting down, or thank you for bringing this for me. It could be as small as that. It's very, very important to appreciate the child. To make his classroom experience pleasant. So by this, what I mean is class teacher also plays a role here. The class teacher has to address the class and talk about and make them, sensitize them on what the child is suffering from, or what the problem that the child is facing. So that children, I've seen that the children are so empathetic, and then they make the experience of the child in the classroom also so much better and so much pleasant. So it reduces your work. And obviously the work also matters. So the work that is being given, is it according to his level? Is it something that he will be able to grasp easily? Is it very long, or is it very short? If it's very long, then I think most children with learning disabilities, they find it difficult. So you have to structure and plan accordingly to make his classroom experience pleasant, so that he looks forward to coming to school. The child shouldn't be, saying he doesn't want to go to school because there's so much work, which is not according to his level also. It is also important to note his mode of learning. By this, what I mean is the child more of a visual learner? Is the child more of an auditory learner? Does the child learn better when some concrete materials are given to him? So you have to note that. Obviously, it's like you cannot completely 100% make his mode of learning through that, but majorly it should be that. So the child that I'm working with, he learns beautifully when there are lots of visuals and pictures. So we try to include that as much as possible. Working towards making the child independent. So by independence, what I mean is, if the child, say, so the child that I work with, he will remove his jacket and leave wherever he is and forget about it. He'll not even bother to ask or look for it. He'll forget. If you ask him also, where did you keep it? He does not remember. So a lot of trials. So I've been able to make the child able to, as soon as he removes his jacket, he will fold it. Initially, he used to just crumple it and put it in his bag. Now he's at least better in folding his jacket. He'll go to his cubby, he'll take out his bag, he'll put it in his bag, and he'll come back. So that is also independence. You have to work towards that so that the child is independent. Even if you're not there, the child does it. You don't have to instruct him to do it. Now, I will. This is him making schedule. He's become so used to it and he loves it that now he makes his own schedule. So even in class, sometimes he just asks for his exercise book. There's a rough exercise book. And then on Saturday, what he wants to do, he will just write down. So here he's written Friday, wake up, arrow, dosa. Dosa is his favorite. So that's what he eats in the morning every day for breakfast. Then arrow, bath, then yellow school bus. So that he has learned to do it.
1 second, Tasnim. Kavita, can you mute your mic, please? Tasnim, can you mute Kavita's mic because her video is also like keeping on switching with yours.
Kavita, okay,
Yeah. Just go there, click it, and mute it.
do it.
You can't find Rob, it's okay.
I'm looking for a wait.
You can search for her in the participants, Tasnim. Might be easier.
I couldn't find her. Megan.
You continue.
Yeah, okay, I'll continue. So when this lockdown was announced, so we all had to take online sessions and it was very new for all of us. So I have, through my experience, so these are the 4 key points that I've learned. And these are first is duration of the session. So you have to decide upon that, whether you're going to take it for half an hour or an hour. And you have to also keep in mind if the child will be able to focus. So if you're taking for like 1.5 hours and if the child is not focused at all, then it's all counterproductive. You're just wasting your time and the child's time. So even if it's just for 15 minutes, it has to be productive. So you have to decide upon the duration of the session. And also, what is your goal? Are you going to work upon his academics or behavior, or is it just going to be a fun session, or are you going to include both some element of fun and some learning? So you have to decide on that, and that depends upon the child. Will the child be able to take it? Will the child be able to grasp it? Is the child comfortable learning through this medium? That also plays a very important role. Structure, I understood structure is very important. I think for the past 2 sessions, I've done this structure. I've included structure in the online session because the child does not understand the concept of time. It's very difficult for them to grasp the concept of time. So half an hour, how long is half an hour? They don't know. What I've done is, let me share my screen. So this is how I start. Suppose I start the session at 1:30. I put the picture of the clock also so that the child also knows how to read the time. I say revision time. I've for the past 2 sessions, I've asked the mother also to keep the clock on the table so that he sees. So I will ask him, now what time is it? So he tells me 1:40. So 1:40, what time? What will we do? So he'll say, oh, watch a video. So then I show him a video. Oh, then when it's almost 1:50, then I ask him, oh, what time is it? Can you tell me? So he tells me 1:50. Oh, 1:50, it's time for. So he says revision. That's how I structure it. And I think especially with children on the spectrum, structure and routine works very well. So they're very comfortable and they know what is expected of them and they know what to do. So the last thing is inclusion of some fun element. Initially, when I started, I didn't include, like, it didn't occur to me. So I used to start my session, initially a little bit of warm up. Oh, what did you do? How was your day? And then I used to tell him, that, okay, today we'll learn about this, this, this. So are you ready? Shall we start? And then I used to start. But I took feedback from the mother, and then she actually told me to include some fun elements so that he looks forward to the session. So I've started doing that, and I think it's important, like in every session, that the time for some fun. I think the activity also, if you can change for every session, then it'll be more fun for the child. And I think for the past two sessions, I've seen that he's enjoying a lot, and he's more focused, and I think he enjoys a lot. So these are the 4 key points that I've noted through my experience with online session. So I think that's it from me. And we have with us Mrs. Chandana Bhatnagar, a parent who has availed our service and who is ardently involved in the progress of our child, and who's here to share her thoughts on shadow teaching. And we would like to introduce her, and we would like her to share her thoughts with our audience.
Welcome,
Yeah,
Chandana.
hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chandana, and my son, he has been working with Tasnim for the past 1.5 years, and it has been a great experience. I've noted a few key points that I wanted to bring up, and one is how this whole relationship helps the child. The first thing I think it has helped my son is the confidence he has in school. So now that he has someone who knows he can fall back on, he knows that he can always count on that person being there. He has more confidence in his ways, in his communication, and in his academics. So like Tasnim shared with you, him going in front of the class of 25 students and presenting something, that was something I could have never imagined. But it's happening because his confidence is built now, because he has been appreciated for the right stuff. One thing our children don't realize is what is right and what is necessarily wrong, what is good behavior and what is bad behavior. And sometimes we have to tell them that this is not acceptable. This behavior is not acceptable. Whereas when they do something good, we have to appreciate and say, yeah, this is what you're supposed to do again. So that helps them build the right relationships also. The second thing how the shadow teacher helps is to help build the peer relationship. Not always our children are able to reach out to their peers when they want to play, when they want to talk, when they just want to spend some time. And the peers are also a little hesitant in reaching out to our children because they may not know how to deal with a child on spectrum, or our children may not be communicating enough. So the peer relationship really solidifies and becomes very strong with the help of a shadow teacher, especially a shadow teacher who knows when to step in and when to step away. So we don't have to unnecessarily interfere every single time that the children are interacting. And sometimes the shadow teacher can just take a step back and say, I'm just going to let the children handle him and he will be just fine. So that is where also a shadow teacher really helps. I had 3 points noted here for making the relationship between the shadow teacher and the family work, and I'll just quickly go over them. Mithun, do we have time? Around a couple of minutes?
Yeah, we have around 7 minutes.
Okay, so yeah, just very quickly, there are 3 things which I learned in the last 3-4 years working with different shadow teachers. One is that there has to be constant communication and feedback back and forth. So it's not just that I will give feedback to the shadow teacher and not accept feedback. I should also accept the feedback from the shadow teacher, because she is the one spending the majority of the day with my child. So she can give me feedback and say, ma'am, you're not doing this properly at home, or maybe we can focus more on letting him have fun at home, or letting him take up painting as a hobby. So the feedback loop has to be continuous. Me giving feedback to the shadow and the shadow giving feedback to me. I think both way it works. So the parent has to be open to feedback. Second thing is that there has to be consistency between home and school. So let's say the child has a specific behavior. It has to be handled the same way in school and the same way at home. It cannot be like it is acceptable at home but not acceptable in school, because that just ends up confusing the child. So consistency is key for our children, and that's where we, the shadow and the parents work together to make it easy for the child. The last thing is that we have, everyone has a relative importance for academics and for social activities. So the shadow and the parents have to be on the same page that this is how much academics is important and it's not the most important thing in the world, or this is how much the social interaction is important. There cannot be a mismatch over there where at home he's only studying and at school he's only playing, or at school he's only studying, at home he's always playing. There has to be a balance, and it has to be the right balance. So again, it's very important to communicate your vision for your child, your short-term and long-term goals for your child, and make sure they are in line with what the child is capable also. So those are the few things I noted down that I'll share with the other parents from a parent's perspective. That's it.
Thank you, Chandana. I mean, that would have been like, one of the most insightful conversations we had, because most of the doubts I keep getting is like, from the parents' point of view, how they engage with the shadow. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Bindiya ma'am. Thank you, Tasnim. Thank you, Chandana. I think we got like, at least, I actually wanted somebody from the school also to join for the webinar so that we get a full rounded perspective of the whole shadow teaching process. Now I would like the participants to ask the questions, like if you have any queries on the practice, or right now online classes are happening. So what's the role of shadow teacher on the online session? Any of the queries, you can mute your mic and speak.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, hi. This is Palak here. And I was wondering, what is the age limit to start shadowing a child, or till what maximum limit, age limit that we can do that in a regular school setting?
Bindiya ma'am, would you like to take it?
Hi, Palak. I would actually not put an age limit to it. It would all depend on the need of the school. We've had children who were lucky enough to have a good teacher who was able to support the child herself in the classroom. So, but the child goes on to the next year, to the next classroom, and the teacher is not able to handle, and then the family needed a support teacher. So that happens a lot. We've seen that. So I wouldn't say an age limit, but it is more based on the need of the classroom or the teacher. Now, if we were to talk about an age, we usually, I am of the opinion that at least at the kindergarten level, a teacher should be able to support the child in the classroom without the help of a shadow. Because a shadow definitely brings with it a stigma. It is, there is as far as all the other children are concerned, they'll be like, why is this child having one adult with him all the time, her all the time? So there is definitely a stigma that comes with it. So we try to avoid it as much as possible, so that give the shadow, or use a shadow only when it's absolutely necessary. So to me, a child can probably go without a shadow at least up until completion of UKG. Maybe first grade would be a good time to make use of a shadow, at least according to. And again, as I said, it would also depend on the needs of the child and how accommodating the class teacher or the school is of the child's needs also. Does that answer your question, Palak?
Yeah, it does. But I'm just wondering, if the child reaches high school and then a lot of behaviors, a lot of adolescent, behaviors come in, and it's difficult because the child might also feel uncomfortable.
Correct. I should have spoken about that also. So I was just talking about the beginning age, but I am also a little reluctant to have a shadow once the child crosses grade 6, maybe. But having said that, we do have shadows who are successfully supporting children in middle school also, even when I say that. But the reason, exactly like what you pointed out, it is stigmatizing for the child. And at adolescence, there are a lot more issues that a child has to deal with. And to have one more stigma that the child has to deal with is going to be all the more stressful for the child. So for that reason, I try to talk to I sometimes engage with the school, I engage with the teachers and try to see if there are ways that we can avoid having a shadow there and support the child in a lot of different ways possible. So at that point, I do have conversation with the school, conversation with the families to see what are the alternatives to that, alternatives to having a shadow being in the classroom with the child. So I would say up until 5th grade, I'm okay with it. Maybe 11 years, 12 years is where I would actually draw the line with having a shadow in the classroom.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
Can you hear
Hello.
me? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to add a little more with Palak's question. I'm Sucheta here. The thing is, as we were speaking all the time, it was all about kids who needs more help in academics, more help in social behavior and emotional behavior. But what if the child is too good in academics, like probably a child who is very high in his IQ level, who can manage himself with what's happening in the school, but yes, the child has a lot of physical, emotional, and social problems. For such kids, as we know, we do need shadows for them because they cannot communicate themselves easily. But what is the age limit for them? Because it tends to become very dependent. Because they are very smart, they tend to become dependent on the shadow. How to help them?
Sujita, what I can give you an example of a setting that I am currently a consultant for. I consult for a school where I help facilitate the inclusion process. In fact, we have tried, or I'm working there for the school. I'm a consultant for the school, so I am an inside person for the school. So I'm able to influence the school in making a lot of decisions regarding special education and inclusion and stuff like that. So there I have actually asked the school that let's not have an external person come in to support the child. We need to have a system in place within the school for every child who walks in through that door, no matter what the learning need of the child is. So in those situations, what we do is we probably, in an example like what you brought up, we probably would look at a lot of other alternatives. We are probably not just looking at supporting a child in that classroom. We are looking at, is that classroom the appropriate setting for the child? Do we have to accelerate the child's academic program to meet his needs? Because his learning need is different in a way that it is more ahead of his peers. It's accelerated, his need is. So then I would be looking at a lot of other things there. So maybe I might even think about a pull-out program to give him the academic stimulation that he requires, but he can come back to his classroom for the social piece. So for lunchtime, he could be with the classroom, for PE time, or for any socialization needs that he would be met with his peers in his classroom. So for that particular child, I would be looking at a lot of other options. So I wouldn't be thinking about just a shadow there. So that would be looked at very differently.
So probably, see, I am speaking directly about my son only. So if you say is so if he goes to a school, I should be removing him out during the academic session and putting him only during the social interaction type.
No, this would be a conversation that you would have with the school, and figure out what is it that we can do to help support his needs academically. If it is not, whatever he's receiving in his class is not what is appropriate for him, right? So these are conversations that we would have, and as a professional, I would be happy to help you offline also in trying to figure out how we can do this, or what are some of the options that we can put forth to the school to understand what is the bandwidth of the school, what is it that the school can provide for the child, and what is it that as a parent you can provide the school to support the child from outside. So these are things that we can have conversations about.
Sure, ma'am. I'll come in contact with you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hello, ma'am. Yeah, hello, I'm Divya here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Divya.
Okay. Ma'am, so I'm a parent and my son is 5. So last year, actually, the school was very, they allow parents also to shadow. So last year, when he was in LKG, I had shadowed him throughout the year. And the reason being because he was restless. Like one-on-one, he does exceptionally well. But in a group setting, like circle time and all, he's not able to sit. He doesn't show interest. Even writing also, he won't sit and write. And while the other kids are all writing. So when I'm there, then he does. And the thing is like, so when I step out of the class, then he's like, oh, mom is not there, so I can move around. So, but when I'm there, then he knows that, no, I will not allow that, and he is sits. So now my question is, like, obviously it's not right that I continue shadowing him even once the school restarts, or even if, next year when he will be in first. So this year he'll be in UKG, but next year when he'll be in first. So like if I get a shadow tutor, can my goal be where she tries to make him independent, such that over probably 6 months or 1 year, he's independent and he doesn't require a shadow anymore? Is that can that goal be there?
Um, Divya, one thing that we need to be mindful of is just because we have a shadow and we have set a certain goal for a child, it doesn't mean that the child would necessarily achieve that goal in the time that we have decided in our heads, because that is
Okay.
according to our convenience, right? We need to understand where the child is. Is the child ready for a particular skill at that point? So say for example, your child is, so he's probably around 4 or 5 right now.
He's 5 now. He's 5.5. Yeah.
So now when we look at other children who are 5 years old, they're probably able to sit quietly, or sit, follow the rules, sit in the classroom,
Yes.
do what the teacher wants them to do. All that is there. And
That's right.
so for us, our criteria is that 5-year-old, right? All those other 5-year-olds who are doing that right now, and you want your
True.
child to do that. But then that doesn't mean that your child would be ready to do it. He is definitely not ready to do it right now. He's 5 too, but he's not ready to do it right now, right? And you're not sure when he's going to show that readiness. He might show it at 6, or he might show it at 5.5, or he might not show it until 7. We don't know,
Okay.
right? So that kind of I would discourage you from having a time goal. You can have your goals, right? And your teacher can help you facilitate getting the child to that goal. But that doesn't mean that your child's readiness should kick in for that. So we need to give that room for our children to develop, right? And give them the time. Time is so important for our children. So important for every child for that matter, right? So we give them the time and see when the child is ready for that, we can work on it then. Right now, he's definitely not ready for it. And you want him to be in a regular classroom. So definitely facing a shadow with him would be helpful. But how long, that he will have to decide. He will have to tell us for it.
Okay. Right. And also, I mean, as a parent, it's not right to shadow, right? I mean, isn't it?
I usually discourage parents from doing that. The rationale that I have for doing that is that, see, why do we send our children to school? We're sending our children to school for them to understand that there is a setting that is different from home. Home is a comfortable place for you, right? And you don't, even if you have rules, you may be okay with it is okay for you to bend some rules, or not bother about some rules at some times. Home is a comfort zone, right? And you are part of that comfort zone. So when you take yourself, or you transplant yourself from this comfort zone and put yourself in that structured zone where you want your child to learn structure from, the child is also a little confused, right? Because you're there in both these zones. In fact, he should be going out and learning about the outside world from school, and come back home and be himself, right? So you being in both those settings can confuse the child. So for that reason, I try to discourage parents from doing that.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much.
Hi, Bindiya.
Hi, Yasmin.
Hi, how you doing? We have met once, I remember. Um, this, see, I'm getting a little confused because talking about stigma, you were saying that you would discourage a child having a shadow from 6th grade onwards. Now, my son is in 6th grade right now, and when he was in 5th grade, starting off 6th grade, he was okay. I mean, he seems to be still okay with it, but sometimes in 6th grade, before this lockdown happened, he kept coming home a little upset because he was getting stigmatized by other children where they would tell him, why do you need a babysitter? You should speak after yourself. You should speak for yourself. Why is she speaking for you? Things like that have started happening now that he's in 6th grade. And after lockdown, once 7th grade starts, how do I deal with that? Because school, I spoke to them already, but they were in the opinion that in 7th grade, when the classes are reshuffled again, it's at least in the beginning, he should have a shadow to settle in and all that. Because Rohan, my son is a child who will not come home and tell what they've been doing in school, what his homework is, or what is the next task he has to do.
Right.
And he misses out on a lot of tasks to finish and all these things. So he's been having a shadow and a really great one. It's been going really well. It's only once these children started stigmatizing him that he started coming back with, I don't want it, I don't want it. It happens on and off, not always.
Right.
Happy to have her there because he feels more confident. But sometimes this started happening where before the lockdown, where he would tell me, why do I have it? Why do I have to? I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know what to do out of this and how to go about it.
Right. So as I said, I usually draw the line there because that is when we start having a lot of peer pressure and a lot of, there's a lot more stigma. It becomes a lot more stigmatizing for the child at that age. So that is usually where I draw the line. But having said that, we do have a lot of shadows who are supporting children in, I think grade 7 maybe is the highest grade that we are supporting right now. Now, how do we decide that? To me, it has to be with input from the child also, right? Now, in this case, your son is clearly communicating to you that he's uncomfortable, which means we have to listen to him. We have to take his opinion into consideration. Now, what I would recommend is maybe you sit down and have a conversation with him, right? Now, we need to understand, or he needs to understand, that the school still requires that a support teacher be there for him. So we'll have to have this open conversation with him where we talk about, can we come up with an arrangement where the teacher is there for some time to support you, or for certain subjects to support you, or in certain aspects, or in certain certain skills, maybe note taking, or keeping your things organized, or for communication purpose, or whatever. You could have this conversation with him in a lot of different ways, but it is very important that you listen to what he has to say, and before you make a decision, that has to be weighed. What he has to say has to be weighed. So Yasmin, again, I would be happy to take this offline and support you in that as well, but let's have a conversation with him. He should be a key participant in this decision. That is what I would recommend.
I've already done that. I mean, I've already spoken to him. I've already spoken to school. With the coordinator, we already decided that once school restarts, that a weaning off process, a slow one, going to start where she will sit further away from him, not be there all the time, not be there every day. These kind of things I have already requested. And the coordinator—
Is he okay with that arrangement?
I'm sorry?
Is he okay with that arrangement?
He's not someone who will come to you and just his heart out. He will say okay at the end to everything that we request from him, but I will still not know, is he 100% comfortable with it.
Right. So in that case, what I would recommend, Yasmin, is let's not stress over it right now. Let the schools reopen. Let us start trying out that model and see how he likes it. and we will give him some time to experience it and let him come back and tell you how he feels about it.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah.
Sorry, two more things. I just wanted to
Sure.
point out more things if you could give me the time. One is I did try to speak to school about the stigmatizing thing with, where they should, take out an awareness to the other students, what it does with special needs kids if they say certain things to them. So a few things have been happening, which I'm happy about. Second thing is the school is not too bad with taking on ideas and all of these things, luckily. Second thing is, once school restarts, in terms of rebounding with the child, because there will be quite a huge gap, I think it would be, maybe we should do this offline, talk about how they should rebound and build a rapport again and these kinds of things, because I'm a little worried about that once the school restarts. And in what happens if school starts quite late, let's say August, September, it still hasn't started, what are we going to do?
Right. So those are things that we can probably discuss offline. And we're also exploring ways in how our shadows can support an online classroom if the child is still expected to attend online classes with the school, and how is our shadow going to support that. So we're still exploring those kinds of options also. So this is definitely something that we can take offline and speak.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Bindiya.
Yeah.
Thanks, Yasmin.
Thank you, Yasmin. There is one question on the chat. Some schools are very quick in wrongly declaring a child to have a shadow even at preschool level. The child might be taking more time in adjusting, or it might be under or overstimulating for that child. How do you deal with this issue? It's from Anudat. I think it's something that we face like on a regular basis.
Right. We do see that a lot. In fact, what we usually do is at least what I usually do if I get a request of this sort is I tell the school that I would like to come and observe the child and see what's going on. As I said earlier, we try our best not to have a shadow if it is not absolutely necessary. So if we go and observe the child in the classroom and see what exactly is going on, and then maybe give some tips to the teacher, help the teacher understand why the child is struggling in the classroom, and what are some of the accommodations that the teacher can make in the classroom while she's teaching the rest of them to help this child. So it might not be a lot of things that the teacher would have to go out of her way to do. It might be small little strategies that the teacher can incorporate into her daily class. So I usually would start there. I would have that conversation with the school. I would have the conversation with the teacher. But I've also had instances where the school and the teachers are resistant to that. They're close to that. They don't want to take up any more than they already have. So these are situations that we usually evaluate on a case-to-case basis. So once we figure out that, or if we get the feeling that the teacher is open to learning, the teacher might be able to work with the child herself with a little bit of support from us, we would continue it that way. But if we see that the teacher is absolutely close to the idea of doing it on her own, and she wants somebody to come from outside and support her, then we might think about having a child. So we do look at it on a case-to-case basis.
Is there any other question, or can we take a question from the chat? So there's one more question, like why can't, I think this is from Fame Shobha. She's asking, it would be great if all schools start having training sessions for their teachers in shadowing.
Definitely. So now the problem there is, now it's not enough to have training. Where do the teachers come from? So when you say, if you look at a classroom, these days there are schools that have kindergarten, preschool classes of 25 students in a class. I still don't get it because developmentally a child is not ready to be in a classroom of 25 kids to access learning at that age. But there are schools where you have 25 kids in a classroom, so 25 to 30 kids in a classroom. So what is the school's reasoning behind that? For them, it is just one resource for that class. Now, there are some schools that might have a teaching assistant for that class of 30 students or 25 students. But again, most schools try to get away with that one teacher. Now, having a shadow, appointing a shadow would mean that the school has to find another resource to do this. Now, I'm sure the school would decide to probably let the parent pay for that additional resource. But if that is okay with the parents, then that is an option that we can think about. But then this training sessions for shadows would make sense. But schools have to invest in that additional resource to facilitate something like a shadow program in their schools.
Is there any other question? I mean, any parents or any teachers have any questions related to shadow teaching? I know that there's asked one more question, whether do you match gender, personality, etc. See, generally, we don't, I mean, most schools are not really open to having male shadows. So we also preferably we also give mostly female shadows. This has to do with a lot of the things that happens around. Um, yeah, can you give training in Kannada?
Who was that question targeted to?
Sri has asked the question. Yeah, we do have shadows from Bangalore who are bilingual, who speaks both Kannada and English. But most of the schools that we work with are in international medium or are at KV level, so we don't really face the issue of Kannada that much.
So they're looking for training, is it, Mithun? He's asked about training.
We can give, not a problem. I think training we can find
training
something.
We can, yeah, that we can probably discuss offline. That is not a problem.
Right. Anusha has a question. I want to know, what if the child is overly dependent on the shadow teacher, because the shadow teacher is always there and the child is not putting their best. How can a change be made there, or how can that situation be avoided?
So these are the situations where supervision becomes very important, right? So it is not just training. We can train the shadow all you want, but how the shadow delivers that service to the child is so important. So if this shadow is attending supervision regularly, these are things that would be discussed there. What are some of the next steps? What would you do to slowly wean the child away from a shadow? What are some of the skills that the child can do on his own? Like Tasnim mentioned earlier, it must be very, very small things, like putting your jacket or your sweater away once you remove it, or when something falls down, picking it up. These are some things, sometimes shadows are so ready to do it for the child, even without giving the child the opportunity to try it on his own. So these are all things that we get to talk about in supervision. And if as a supervisor, I find that this is happening and I notice that this child is probably not being given opportunities to do things on their own, that would be an area that I would work with that shadow teacher. So for these reasons, supervision definitely helps.
So we have a question from Shruti Nedungadi. I think you are a Christ-state. I heard the name before. Okay. It's often a challenge to convince parents to follow the inputs given by shadow teachers at home as well. And what happens is that the child follows a particular pattern at school, but that work may be undone at home. How can we speak to the parents regarding this? I mean, she's asking about how schools can communicate to the parents regarding the role of a shadow teacher.
Okay. As a shadow teacher, do you have access to the parent? Do you communicate with the parent directly? Shruti?
Hi, this is Shruti. So actually, I'm not a shadow teacher. I work as a counselor with a school here. Okay. And we do have a couple of shadow teachers from Insighte who, are working with our children. So the biggest challenge that we have is we managed to convince the parent to get a shadow teacher for the child. However, following the instructions that the shadow teacher gives for certain, behavioral patterns to be broken or certain behavioral patterns to be created becomes a challenge. So the child we're doing a lot of hard work with the child in school, but the moment they go home, that pattern sort of breaks down, and then the child is sort of really confused as to how to behave, and the shadow teacher ends up doing double the amount of work.
Right. Shruti, would you be able to help me with an example that you might have in mind when you're asking this question?
So we actually have a child who is in Montessori. So he's about 3.5, almost 4 years old now. Okay. And he has a shadow teacher because the child has been diagnosed with ADHD. Now, we had a number of concerns with sitting tolerance, hitting other children. Food was a major challenge because his food was very high in sugar and a lot of junk food. So the shadow teacher has been working with him for almost 6 months now. We've managed to work a lot on his, behavioral patterns and those kind of things. And a constant feedback is being given to the parent to make sure that his diet is not high in sugars or food that sort of gives him too much energy. In school, we're able to follow it because the parent sends a certain kind of food, but the moment he goes home, he gets rewarded with chocolates or sweets or those kind of things on almost on a daily basis. And of course, being a child, he comes back and tells us about it, so we bring it up with the parent again. And then the parent is like, yeah, but he did this so well, so it's dark chocolate, nothing will happen, those kind of things. And the child is getting, it's not really benefiting the child in the way that it should be.
Kriti, now I'm going to answer this question with respect to this particular example that you have said.
Sure.
I have a few issues with this example. First thing is that the child is 3, you said? 3 or 4?
On 4 years old, yes.
4 years old, and the child has been diagnosed with ADHD itself is a problem.
Correct.
Because
yeah.
ADHD is something that cannot be diagnosed until the child is at least 7 years of age.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that itself is an issue. And the other thing too is what I usually tell families and schools and support teachers or teachers is that there is definitely some baggage a child brings from home to school.
Correct.
Because his family background, his value systems, what he learns at home, all that comes with the child to the school, right? But there are a lot of cases in which a child's behavior at school is somewhat independent of what happens at home. Because the behaviors that the child exhibits in the classroom might be triggered by something in the classroom. Right? So it could be a snide comment from a friend, or it could be something that a task that the teacher asked the child to do, or it could be something that is in that setting that is triggering the behavior. So for that reason, when a parent comes to me for behavior therapy for some issue that is happening in the school, I usually discourage that because I tell the parent there's nothing you can do at home to change things or change the way he behaves in his school because the triggers are there. So the reason why I brought that up is you did mention that even though he is not following through with his diet at home, does that affect his behavior in school? Do you feel that way?
So actually the problem that happens is that it becomes there's a reward system that has been created by the parent because of this. So the challenge for us is, because his shadow teacher has worked and the teachers are also supporting, we've been able to establish a particular way for the child to behave in class, which is beneficial for the child. Like, rather than throwing a tantrum, you ask for something and those kind of things. What happens now is that the child assumes that because I have behaved a certain way in school, you have to get me a chocolate. Or if there is a birthday in the class, for example, we have to use that chocolate as a reward, and then sort of motivate the child using that for the whole day, saying that, okay, when you're going home, I'm going to give it in your hand for you to hold. And because it's already getting reinforced so often at home, and we were trying to break that pattern a little bit, because the moment we saw a stopping in the sweets and things in school and at home, even his parents reported a lot of improvement in his tantrums and those kind of things at home. So the challenge for me becomes that you are seeing an improvement in your child at home as well as in school, even though the situations are completely different. But by reinforcing a certain kind of behavior, it becomes difficult for the child to really, follow through with that behavior consistently.
Priti, I hear your concern.
Yeah.
I really hear your concern. But, one thing that I want to say in response to that concern is that the child is only 3.
I know.
And how much do you try to modify the behavior of a 3-year-old? I mean, I have difficulty staying away from chocolates.
Yeah.
I'm this old. So depriving a 3-year-old of chocolate is just, it's just very hard for me. So I would say give him some time, because I have a feeling that probably the child is able to pull it together. And that too, he's still 4. And, I'm sure he's struggling. He's really working hard to pull it together in school.
Absolutely.
And if it is that one chocolate when he gets home that his mother gives him, that is actually making him do that throughout school, I would say let him have it. I'm very sorry to say this, but that would be my response, because of his age. He's so small, he's so tiny. So I think, maybe we should just give in to his little whims,
So I
So-
think that's great. Yeah, that's great.
I'm sorry, that's probably not what you
No,
wanted
no,
to
no.
hear. But
Of course not. No, see, the thing is, it's important to get a different perspective because I had thought of
Right,
this in a different way, whereas your opinion has been very different.
correct,
And it
correct.
is also valid, right? So thank you for that. Thank you.
I'm glad you're open to it. Thanks, Shruti.
I think we planned to wind up by 5:30. So I will take one last question, which is there in the chat. I think it's very relevant also. I think Iona has asked the question that schools are closed during an extended period, and there are no, I mean, parents are not taking shadow teachers in the home setup. The shadow cannot visit the house due to the lockdown. How do we convince the parent that we need to work with the child even during the holidays so that there is no downsliding of skills learned? I think, from our perspective, there are few shadows who are working with, like when online classes are happening, we are also monitoring from our end, and then probably following it up with them the same way we do on our classroom setting. That's happening with few shadows that we are working from our end. And wherever there is possible, that we also started home sessions also, which is, I mean, wherever the client and the parent is nearby and there is not much of risk is there, we have started home sessions also. But I would like, I mean, Bindiya ma'am, you can give your perspective on that. Now, when there's a long gap.
Right. So we are still exploring how we can do, if in case the shadow is not able to visit the child's house, how we can do the supporting of the child online, which I think is going to be a little tricky, but we're still exploring that. The other thing too is, again, you might have to have a conversation with the school to figure out, as Tasnim had talked about in her key points on online sessions. Most of our children might not be able to last through an online session for the amount of time that the school is expecting them to. So it is again key to remember how much time can this child hold on to. So we'll probably have to reduce the amount of time that the child will be sitting through an online session, even though his classmates are attending, say, a 30-minute or a 40-minute class session. Maybe this child can only do a 15-minute session or a 10-minute session. So then maybe we could have the teacher support the child by giving them a synopsis of what happened. This is the assignment that we have discussed today, and this is what I would like for you to work on at home. So that would be the format that we would have to probably, tweak and make it a little bit more accessible for our children. So I have been talking to a lot of families who are having children who are attending online classes now, in India, in the US, in Canada, and a lot of different countries. So in fact, I heard from one parent who was talking to me yesterday in Canada, and the child is a fourth grader. So basically what their school is doing is that the teacher would come online just for 30 minutes, just for a half an hour time frame, and the child would be in front of the computer to talk to the teacher at that point. And in that 30 minutes, the teacher basically describes the assignment, tells what the expectation of the assignment is, and gives them the resources that is needed for the child to work on it. That's it. And then the child goes and works on it. So for some of our children, that is probably the only time frame or the only window of attention that we can get from them. And even 30 minutes would be too much for them. So it might have to be broken up into pieces. So there are a lot of different things that we can look at. Like right now, our shadows, as Mithun said, are working with their children online. And we are having our supervision sessions also, and the supervision session and the nature of our supervision sessions have also changed, because now we are thinking about how is it that I can effectively get through to this child on an online platform. What can I do to engage this child on an online platform? So now we are thinking in those terms, right? So we might have to think differently for this particular child, and how long he can sustain his attention, or how long he can access the classes online. So these are things that we will have to think for that particular child. Again, I would be happy to support you offline.